Good morning, boys and girls. Are you ready for a Big Experience 2 today? As I mentioned in Big Experience 1, we are talking about moving on. So we're going to be exploring different parts of our country. And we're going to talk today just for a moment about the United States of America. So I have a map here on the iPad that I wanted to show you. This is a map of the United States. Does anyone know what state we live in? Now, our city is Evansville. Some of you might live in Newburgh, some of you in Evansville, but that's not our state. So Evansville, what? If you said Indiana, kiss your brain. We do live in Indiana. The United States of America is made up of these 50 states that you see here. And we live in Indiana, which is right here. I'm going to zoom, if I can, in on that a little bit. Oops, so sorry. And we live in the blue one right here near my thumb. And we live at the very tip. We live near Illinois, Kentucky, and Ohio. But we live right down here. And we live in the state of Indiana. But all 50 of our states together are called the United States of America. And you guys know that because we do our pledge to the United States of America, and we've talked about that before. Most of our 50 states are together, as you can see on the map, in one big landform. North America, one of the continents, but Alaska and Hawaii are out in the ocean further away, and it takes a long time to get to Alaska and Hawaii from where we live. So today we're going to read a little bit about our country. I'm going to put the map down and I'm going to show you our book we're going to read today, In Our Country. In Our Country is going to show us some of the things that we have in our country right here. I just showed you the map of the United States, and that is our country. So not just in Indiana, but in our country, we're going to see what types of landforms that we have. Okay, this book was written by Susan Kinarzis, and Daniel Morton took the pictures. Remember that sometimes people take pictures for books instead of drawing. This is a map of our country. So this is what I was talking about. These boys and girls are coloring in the different states. They've got all the states together there, and they're coloring them in. That would be a fun activity to do. You can find us right here. This is our state, Indiana. That was a map of our country. In our country, there are many different things. In some parts, there are forests. In some parts, there are forests. A forest has lots of trees. In other parts, there are deserts. It is very dry and warm in the desert. You can see it looks kind of like sand, and there are landforms in the desert. This looks like a little bit of a mountain with in some parts there are beaches. In some parts, there are beaches. What is behind the beach here, boys and girls? The ocean. That's right. Raise your hand if you've visited the ocean before and been on a beach. That's one of my favorite places to go. In others, there are marshes. Marshes. This is a picture of a marsh. See, there's things growing, and there's also water. Wet. It's very wet in a marsh. In some parts, there are rivers. Does anyone know if we have a river in Evansville, Indiana? You might have been to the riverfront before. The Ohio River goes right down in between us and the next state, Kentucky. You can see it if you go down to the riverfront. You will see the Ohio River. It runs a long way, but we know that if we go outside and drive down to our riverfront, we can see the Ohio River. We don't want to get in the Ohio River like this person's doing and stand there because it has a current that moves along pretty quickly and we could fall over. So it's best just to look at our river from the riverfront. In other areas, there are lakes. Look how beautiful this lake is because it's surrounded by something else called mountains. But you guys have probably seen a lake before. There are lakes all around us in Evansville, lakes and ponds. There are some big lakes that are really easy to drive to also. In other parts of the United States, there are canyons. And in other parts, there are prairies. A canyon is generally made from a river running through rock, and over years it's eroded the rock and it forms a canyon where you can go down, and it's like a rock formation that has been made by water. The biggest canyon in the United States is the Grand Canyon. And prairies stretch all over, especially throughout the Midwest. And that is where a lot of this is a picture, it looks like some wheat maybe. That's where a lot of our crops are grown that make bread and other types of things that we eat and that are made from grains. Like we were taught about grains. Those are some grains growing right in that prairie. In some parts, there are snow-capped mountains. I think this is a beautiful picture of a snow-capped mountain. Has anyone ever been to a snow-capped mountain? Let's take care of our whole country. The United States is the fourth largest country in the world, and because it is such a big country, we have many different natural features. When we talked about the desert, we know that very little rain falls in the desert. And when we talked about the marshes are tall grasses that grow from low areas, and they're usually next to rivers or coasts, like along the beach. And let's see, let me pick out a picture of, turn my book back to, there's a marsh. And we know the beach, of course, we talked about that. That's kind of familiar to most people. What about, here's the desert where it's dry. And forests we can find close to our house. The Hoosier National Forest is not very far away. Oh, what about a prairie where a lot of our grains and are grown, a lot of plants. And again, the canyons where water over many, 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 many years has kind of chiseled away at the rock and made a canyon. We're really lucky that in the United States we have so many different kinds of landforms that we can see. Let's look again at this map of the United States. Now we might have to leave Evansville, Indiana to see some of these, but we can drive to a lot of these because you see all of our states are connected. So we can drive a car, well, not all of our states, 48 of our states are connected. We can't get to Alaska or Hawaii without getting in a boat or a plane. But we can get to all the other states, and we can find these different landforms all over our country. Who thinks they would like to see a marsh? Raise your hand if you've ever been to Florida. If you've been to Florida, there are marshes there. The Everglades is a great big national body of water that has a marsh in it. Marshes are when tall grasses grow next to low-lying rivers or oceans, and they're along the coast a lot of times. If they're near an ocean, the coast means that those are those states that are along the edges of our map here, and they have beaches generally and water close to them, and marshes are there. And in the marshes, usually you can find lots of rich plant life and animal life. Let's pretend to go on a trip. Would you want to go to the mountains, the canyons, the beach, the marsh? Where would you want to go? Of all those different landforms that we saw, what would you like to see? We could drive all across the United States and find all of those landforms. That makes it really exciting in our country. But we definitely want to remember to take care of all of those. If we don't take care of them, then they won't be around forever for us to visit. So let's pretend that we're taking a trip. Let's get in our car and put on our seatbelt. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to go to the mountains? You can take whatever trip you want, but on the way, make sure you're looking out the window of the car and taking pictures of everything you see. If we were on our way to Florida, and we got buckled in our car, we have all of our things we need packed up with us. We're going to get in our car and we're going to drive. It's a long way to Florida, boys and girls. We're going to have to stop and go to the bathroom. But on the way, we're probably going to see some things that are really neat. We're going to drive right over the bridge that goes from Evansville, Indiana to Henderson, Kentucky. And look out your window. That is the Ohio River. You can see it. We've already seen a river. So we drive quite a bit further, and we could see some really cool lakes if we went a certain way, because we could see the lakes, Kentucky Lake. We might see, it's a great big lake, or Lake Barkley. We might drive right by that on our way to Florida. That would be really cool. As we kept driving, we would end up driving up into the mountains, and then back down out of the mountains on our way to Florida to the beach. So we would see mountains. They wouldn't be snow-capped mountains. Most likely we wouldn't see any snow there. But if we were there the right time of the year, we might. However, we would see lots of trees and forests on our way through that area. As we kept going and you get closer to the coast of Florida, you might be able to find a marsh. You could stop, get out of your car, and find a marsh where different kinds of animals and plants like to live in that wet area near the coast. Maybe even a swamp. Who do you think lives in a swamp? When we get to Florida, we might see, yes, lots of animals that live in a swamp. Alligators. I think we might definitely see an alligator in the swamp. And when we get down to Florida, we can definitely see a beach, and we see the coastline that goes around the United States. And we've seen a lot of landforms on that little trip. Now you can take a trip. Maybe you want to go out west. We went down from Indiana to Florida, way down here. So we went from here through some states down to Florida. But you might want to go out west, where you would see mountains, you would see grasslands, you would see canyons if you go far enough. And if you went really far, you could get back to the coast way over here on this side of the United States. What trip would you like to go on, and what would you like to see in our country?